The night should have been filled with joy. Balloons hung from the ceiling, laughter bounced around the living room, and the smell of food drifted from the kitchen. My mother was at the center of it all, sitting proudly in her chair as relatives surrounded her, clapping and singing for her birthday. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that this was the night things would be different, that maybe for once I would feel like I truly belonged at that table. Then she looked at me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her voice cutting through the noise with a softness that carried something sharp beneath it. "Alvin, you'll never measure up to your brother. Chase is the one who takes care of this family." The room fell silent in my head. The laughter, the clapping, the music, all of it disappeared, leaving only the weight of her words. My chest tightened. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I had heard those comparisons my entire life, but never spoken out loud in front of everyone. It was as if every hidden scar, every silent wound I had carried for years had suddenly been exposed to the whole room. Something inside me snapped. My chair scraped against the floor as I stood up, my voice trembling but loud enough to echo against the walls. "If that's the case, then from now on let Chase pay all the bills. I won't send another dime." The air thickened instantly. Faces turned toward me, eyes wide with shock. My father leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "What money? We've never received a cent from you." That was the moment everything I had hidden, everything I had silently carried, demanded to be seen. My hands shook as I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second, but then I unlocked it and opened the records I had saved. Bank transfers, payments, receipts, years of quiet sacrifices, laid out in numbers. I raised the phone so they could see. "What money?" I repeated, my voice steady now. "This money. The money that kept the lights on, that covered the rent when it was overdue, that paid for the hospital when Dad was sick. The money you thought came from Chase's pocket, when it was mine all along." For a moment, no one moved. My father blinked, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the screen. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her smile gone. Chase froze, his jaw tight, his hands clenched together on his lap. I scrolled back to the first transfer, years ago. My father had been in the hospital, the doctors refusing to begin treatment without a down payment. I was barely surviving back then, working a small job that barely covered my own rent. But I had sold my only car, wired the money, and walked home that night with nothing but an empty wallet and aching feet. I told myself it didn't matter if I had to sleep on the floor, because family came first. But who got the credit? Chase, because he was the one sitting in the hospital room. No one asked where the money had come from. No one thought to question it. They assumed, and I had been too proud, or maybe too foolish, to correct them. I swiped again, showing them the hotel receipt for my mother's grand birthday party 3 years ago. She had wanted something big, something memorable. Chase had stood at the microphone that night, welcoming the guests, smiling like the perfect son. And when she hugged him in front of everyone, thanking him for the beautiful evening, I had stood in the back, holding a glass of water, pretending not to care. But the receipt was in my phone. The payment was in my name. One by one, I showed them more. The rent that had been quietly covered when Dad's job fell through, the medical bills that had been settled before the collectors came knocking, the countless small transfers that kept the family afloat, while I lived with second-hand clothes and ate instant noodles just to survive. Their faces changed as I spoke. My father leaned back, his lips pressed into a thin line. My mother's hands fidgeted with the edge of her dress. Chase looked away, unable to meet my eyes. For years I had carried the weight of being invisible, of watching someone else take the applause while I bled in silence. And now, with every word, that invisibility cracked. But I didn't stop there. My voice grew stronger, steadier. "Do you know what it's like?" I said. "To come home to a dark apartment because you gave your last dollar to keep someone else's lights on? Do you know what it's like to sleep in your truck because you paid someone else's rent? To work 2 jobs, day and night, and still be told you'll never measure up? I lived that. I lived every single day of it. And I did it for you." The room was silent, the kind of silence that weighs more than words. My father's eyes glistened as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. My mother's mouth opened, then closed again. Chase finally looked at me, but his face was unreadable. Guilt, anger, shame, maybe all three. I looked at them, my hands no longer shaking, my chest no longer heavy. For the first time in years, I wasn't silent. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten son. And as I stood there, staring at the family that had never truly seen me, I realized this was just the beginning. The truth was out, but the storm it would bring had only started. The silence after my words was heavier than thunder. I stood there, phone still in my hand, staring at the faces that had always looked through me. My father's lips trembled as if he wanted to ask questions but couldn't find the strength. My mother's eyes darted from me to Chase, searching for a way to escape what she had just heard. Chase sat rigid, his shoulders tight, his jaw clenched. The proud smile that had always seemed glued to his face was gone. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, the evidence already burned into their minds. For years, I had been invisible. For years, I had told myself silence was dignity. But tonight, I realized silence had only made me their ghost. And now that ghost was standing before them, demanding to be seen. "Say something," I whispered, my voice steady but sharp. "For once in your life, tell me you see me." My father's hands tightened around the armrest of his chair. His voice cracked as he finally spoke. "Alvin, we thought—" He stopped, shaking his head slowly. "We thought Chase." Of course. They always thought Chase. They never imagined it could be me. I wanted to scream, to tear down the walls of that house, to shatter every memory where I had been overlooked. But instead I laughed, a bitter, broken laugh that scared even me. "Yes, you thought. And you never asked. That was your mistake." My mother's face twisted. She wanted to defend herself, to find words sharp enough to cut me back into silence, but when she opened her mouth, nothing came. For the first time, she had no comparison, no insult, no ready-made praise for Chase. She only had silence. Chase finally moved. His voice was low, almost too low to hear. "You didn't have to do it, Alvin." I snapped my head toward him, fire in my chest. "Didn't have to? Do you know what it's like to sit in a dark room, wondering if your family will eat tomorrow? Do you know what it's like to hold your phone and see a message from Mom begging for help, and know you have to give up your own dinner just to answer it? You didn't have to do it, Chase, because I did it for you. For them." Every time, his eyes dropped. For once, the golden son had no defense. He had lived under the illusion of being the savior, while I carried the burden of being the silent provider. He had been the face, and I had been the hands. The room's energy shifted. Relatives who had been clapping minutes ago now sat stiff, uncomfortable, whispering to one another. A cousin avoided my gaze. An uncle cleared his throat. The truth was spreading like wildfire across their minds. The image they had of our family was a lie. I took a step back, my chest rising and falling, the taste of freedom bitter on my tongue. "I won't do it anymore," I said firmly. "If Chase is the hero, then let him be the provider. Let him pay the bills. Let him carry the weight. I'm done being the shadow." My mother flinched, as if the words struck her harder than anything else I had said. Maybe because deep down, she knew the truth. Without me, the walls of this house might crumble. For years, I had thought recognition was what I wanted. That if they could just see me, just once, everything would feel right. But as I looked around that room, at the faces stunned into silence, I realized something else. Recognition wasn't enough. What I truly wanted was freedom. Freedom from the endless cycle of sacrifice and invisibility. I turned toward the door, each step heavier than the last. Behind me, chairs scraped as people shifted uncomfortably. My father called my name once, his voice weak, but I didn't stop. For the first time, I wasn't rushing to fix things, to cover their debts, to patch their mistakes. For the first time, I was leaving them with the silence they had always left me in. The night air outside was cold against my face. I breathed it in, filling my lungs with something sharp and clean. For years, I had carried their burdens, their judgments, their blindness. Now, standing under the empty sky, I felt lighter, though the scars inside me still burned. I walked down the street, my mind replaying the moments I had hidden, the long nights in my truck, wrapped in a thin blanket, whispering promises to myself that someday it would be worth it. The meals skipped, the jobs I had worked until my hands blistered, the loneliness that had followed me like a shadow. I had done it all for love, for family, and yet, love had never been returned. But tonight, something shifted inside me. Maybe love wasn't enough. Maybe sacrifice without acknowledgement was nothing but self-destruction. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know how they would survive without me quietly holding the pieces together. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I wanted to see what life looked like when I stopped bleeding for people who never saw the wound. As I reached the corner of the street, my phone buzzed. A message. I pulled it out slowly, half expecting it to be another request for money. But it wasn't. It was from my cousin. Only 3 words glowed on the screen. I never knew. I stared at the message, my eyes stinging. Maybe that was all I had ever wanted. Not applause, not credit, not even gratitude. Just someone, anyone, to finally say, "I see you." The night stretched before me, uncertain and endless. My family sat in that house, surrounded by the truth they could no longer ignore. And me? I walked into the darkness with nothing but the weight of my own heart, lighter than it had ever been. But deep inside, I knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a storm none of us were ready for. The air inside that room felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. Silence lingered, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. The documents on the table in front of me weren't just pieces of paper. They were knives, sharp with betrayal, cutting deeper the longer I stared at them. For years, I had carried the weight of guilt, the constant whisper that I had never done enough. Every family gathering became a reminder of my supposed shortcomings. They always spoke about how Chase, the so-called golden brother, was the one who carried the family on his shoulders. And me? I was just the shadow, the one who was always compared, always falling short. But now, here in my hands, was the truth they had hidden all along. The money I sent month after month, the sacrifices I made when I skipped meals just to make deadlines, the nights I stayed awake chasing impossible goals. It had all been quietly siphoned away, consumed by the very people who made me feel like I was worthless. My brother wore the crown, but it was built with bricks of my sweat, my labor, my pain. I pushed the papers aside and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling as memories came rushing in. Birthdays I missed because I was working late into the night. Family dinners where my absence became a topic of ridicule. They laughed, called me selfish, said I didn't care. Not once did anyone ask what I was doing, why I wasn't there. Not once did anyone see the sacrifices being made in silence. And now, here was the truth. Every cent I thought was supporting them, every contribution I thought they never noticed, had been swallowed whole, hidden in properties, accounts, and investments that were never in my name. They built their security on my back, then turned around and called me the failure. The anger inside me boiled, but it wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. It was about all those years I spent shrinking myself, doubting myself, believing I was less because that's what they told me I was. It was about the stolen identity, the stolen recognition, the stolen years of my life. I stood up and paced the room. My steps echoed against the walls, restless and sharp. I wanted to scream, to tear the papers apart, to let the rage pour out, but a voice inside held me back. Rage wouldn't fix this. Rage wouldn't rewrite the years. What I needed wasn't destruction. It was clarity, strategy, a way forward. I thought about Chase, my brother, the one who was always celebrated, always praised, always the good son. Did he know? Had he been part of this deception from the very beginning? Or was he just a pawn, too? That thought twisted my insides. Because if he knew, if he had been standing tall on a pedestal built on my suffering, then the betrayal wasn't just from my parents. It was from my own blood. I remembered the countless times he patted me on the back, telling me not to worry, telling me that family comes first. Was that his way of mocking me? Or was it guilt disguised as brotherly advice? My hands trembled as I picked up one of the papers again. Numbers, signatures, transactions. Every line screamed betrayal. Yet as painful as it was, I couldn't deny the strange power it gave me. For the first time in years, I wasn't blind anymore. For the first time, I had the truth in my hands. And truth. Truth is dangerous. Truth is heavy. Truth doesn't just sit quietly in a corner. Truth burns. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. The city was alive, but my world felt frozen. The calm outside contrasted with the storm inside me. And I knew, from this point forward, nothing would ever be the same again. Because I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I wasn't the shadow. I was the one holding the fire that could burn down every illusion my family had so carefully crafted. But what would I do with it? Would I expose them in front of everyone? Strip away the masks they wore so proudly? Would I confront Chase directly and demand answers? Or would I wait, silently, watching, letting the truth simmer until the right moment came? These questions circled my mind like vultures, feeding on my anger, on my pain. And yet, beneath all that chaos, there was a strange calm building, a resolve I had never felt before. I realized something that night. For years, I had been living in their story, a story where I was written as the failure, the disappointment, the invisible one. But now I had the power to reclaim my own narrative, to rewrite it, to show them that I wasn't just a footnote in their grand design. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about identity, about worth, about reclaiming the dignity that had been stolen from me. As I sat back down, staring once more at the evidence of betrayal, I whispered to myself, quiet, steady words that felt like a vow. They made me invisible, but soon they'll see me clearer than ever. And in that vow, I felt something shift, a storm no longer uncontrolled, but guided. No longer just anger, but purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, and I knew the battles waiting for me would not be easy. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. Because now, I had the truth. And with the truth, I had power. The only question was, when the moment comes, will they have the courage to face it? Or will they continue to deny me until the very end? The room still smelled faintly of old paper and dust, as if the walls themselves had been holding secrets for decades. I sat there in silence, my fingers gripping the edges of the documents that had already begun to change everything I thought I knew. My heart was pounding, not with fear anymore, but with a new kind of certainty. For years I had been the invisible one, the forgotten son, the shadow in the corner while my brother basked in the spotlight. But those days were gone. With every line of ink on these papers, the truth screamed louder. I wasn't the one who had failed. I wasn't the one who hadn't done enough. No, I was the one who had been carrying this family quietly, invisibly, while they crowned Chase the hero. The silence in the room was heavy, but inside me, something had already shifted. The storm that raged before was no longer wild. It was focused, sharp, and ready. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it all sink in. And then another memory came rushing back. I remembered the night I had nothing left in my bank account, barely enough to eat. I skipped meals, worked through the hunger, convinced myself it was just temporary, all because I believed my family needed me. I thought, if I can make it through, at least they'll be okay. And while I starved, they sat at dinner tables filled with food bought from the money I sent. They laughed, celebrated, lived their lives comfortably, never once acknowledging the silent sacrifice that kept them afloat. That memory cut deeper than any number on a page, because betrayal wasn't just financial, it was emotional. It was the deliberate blindness, the way they chose to ignore the truth right in front of them because it was easier to believe I was the failure. I stood up, paced across the floor again, the floorboards creaking under my steps. My reflection in the window stared back at me, tired eyes, clenched jaw, but something new in that reflection. Strength. For the first time, I didn't see a victim. I didn't see the forgotten one. I saw someone who had endured storms, carried mountains, and was still standing. And now, I was ready to make a choice. Would I burn it all down? Would I walk into the next family gathering, slam the papers on the table, and watch their faces crumble as the lies unraveled? Or would I wait? Would I use this truth carefully, like a blade kept sharp, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The thought made me pause. Because revenge felt sweet in the moment, but I knew it wasn't enough. Revenge would make me like them, selfish, blinded by pride, desperate for validation. No, what I wanted was bigger. What I wanted was to rewrite everything. I wanted them to finally see me, not as the failure, not as the forgotten son, but as the man I had become, a man who didn't need their approval anymore. I walked back to the table, picked up the papers, and slid them carefully into a folder. My hands were steady now. The choice was made. I wasn't going to waste my strength proving them wrong. I was going to spend it building something so undeniable, so unshakable, that they could never again hide behind their lies. And yet, deep down, a part of me still longed for answers. Did Chase know? Was he part of this betrayal, or was he just as blind as I had been? That question lingered like smoke in my mind, and I knew one day I would have to face him. But not tonight. Tonight, I needed to face myself. I poured a glass of water, sat back down, and stared at the dim light of the lamp. The silence no longer felt suffocating. It felt like space for a new beginning. Because here's the truth. Pain can either break you or it can build you, and I had already been broken long enough. It was time to rebuild. I thought about all the nights I doubted myself, all the times I questioned whether I was enough. Those voices, they didn't belong to me. They were echoes of my family's lies, whispers designed to keep me small. But I wasn't small anymore. I had carried their weight, survived their silence, endured their rejection. And through it all, I had become something stronger. I wasn't just the forgotten son. I was the son who endured, the son who built in silence, the son who rose even when no one believed in him. The night stretched on, and as I finally closed the folder and placed it in a drawer, I felt a strange peace. Not the peace of ignorance, but the peace of clarity. Because the truth may have hurt, but it also freed me. Freed me from their story. Freed me from the chains of comparison. Freed me from the invisible prison I had been locked in for years. Tomorrow would come, and with it, decisions, confrontations, maybe even war. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what was ahead. I whispered to the empty room words that were more for me than for anyone else. They thought they could erase me, but I was never gone. I was only waiting. And now, it's my turn. And with that vow, I turned off the lamp, letting the darkness fill the room. But inside me, a fire burned brighter than ever. This wasn't the end of my story. This was only the beginning. And if this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever carried the weight in silence while others took the credit, then you know what it means to rise again. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next chapter of stories like this. Your support means the world, and it keeps the fire alive for more voices that deserve to be heard. Because remember, no one stays forgotten forever.